My coworker held his wrist upright next to my face inside a crowded executive elevator in downtown Minneapolis, showing off a brand new Rolex he'd just bought with his signing bonus, laughing while telling me my old analog watch looked like cheap plastic something from a gas station spinner rack. He said it loud enough for 4 other people in that elevator to hear every single word, grinning the entire time like he'd just won some contest I never agreed to enter. That watch on my wrist belonged to my grandfather, and I never once explained that to him because explaining myself to someone like Chad felt like a complete waste of my own time and breath. I stood there quietly, letting him have his little moment, watching the numbers climb toward the executive floor where I had a meeting scheduled that Chad genuinely had no idea existed. The elevator doors opened on the top floor, and our company's founder walked in directly, spotted me immediately among that entire crowd, and gave me a small respectful bow before saying, clearly enough that Chad's smug little smile completely disappeared, that my $50 million seed fund had officially cleared final approval. Stick around for this whole story, because you need to see exactly what happened to Chad's face once he understood who he'd actually been mocking. Hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe right now before we get into it. My name is Josie Lindqvist, and I am 29 years old. I grew up in a small house outside Duluth, Minnesota, right along the edge of Lake Superior, where the wind coming off that water cut straight through any jacket you own no matter how many layers you added underneath it. My father, Carl Lindqvist, worked on the assembly line at a manufacturing plant that made parts for mining equipment, standing on concrete floors for 10-hour shifts that left his knees aching by the time he turned 45. My mother, Ingrid, cleaned houses throughout our neighborhood and the wealthier lakeside properties nearby, taking me along some Saturdays when school stayed closed, letting me sit quietly in the corner of enormous kitchens doing homework while she scrubbed floors that cost more than our entire house was probably worth. Money stayed tight our whole childhood, though my parents never once made me feel poor exactly, more like careful, like every dollar had a job waiting for it before it ever arrived in our house. My younger brother Eric and I wore hand-me-downs from cousins 2 towns over, and our Christmas gifts usually came from the discount bin at a local hardware store rather than anything flashy or new. My grandfather Anders lived with us the final 3 years of his life, moving into our small spare bedroom once his own health declined too much for him managing alone. He'd worked his entire career at a local bank, starting as a teller and eventually becoming a loan officer, and he understood money in a way nobody else in my entire family genuinely did. He taught me about compound interest sitting at our kitchen table when I turned 10 years old, using dried beans spread across the tablecloth to show me exactly how small amounts of money grew larger over time if you simply left them alone long enough. He gave me his old analog watch the year before he passed away, a simple stainless steel piece he'd worn to that bank every single day for almost 4 decades, telling me that real value rarely announced itself loudly, that the flashiest things in any room usually meant the least. School felt complicated growing up near Duluth, watching classmates whose families owned lake cabins or newer cars, while my own family stretched every single dollar, just keeping our modest house properly heated through those brutal Minnesota winters. My best friend throughout those years, a girl named Priyanair, came from a family running a small motel along the highway, and we bonded instantly over understanding exactly how exhausting it felt watching wealthier families treat casual spending like something completely ordinary. I discovered investing almost by accident during my sophomore year of high school, using birthday money alongside earnings from a part-time job bagging groceries to buy a handful of shares in a small regional company my grandfather had mentioned admiring years earlier. That tiny investment grew steadily over the following years, and I started reading everything I could find about markets, business fundamentals, and exactly how patient, disciplined investors built genuine wealth quietly over decades rather than through flashy, risky bets. I graduated high school and enrolled in a finance program at the University of Minnesota, working almost full-time hours at a local credit union throughout my entire college experience, just covering costs my modest scholarship missed. I graduated with genuine relief rather than celebration, understanding clearly that surviving college represented just the beginning of building something considerably larger than anyone in my own family had ever previously imagined possible. I took a data analyst position at a growing robotics company called Vantage Robotics right after graduation, a company barely 5 years old at the time, founded by an engineer named Marcus Kessler, who'd built early prototype warehouse automation robots literally inside a rented garage space before landing his first serious client contract. I remember my very first week at Vantage clearly, watching Marcus walk through our small office, personally introducing himself to every single new hire regardless of their position, treating our receptionist with exactly the same genuine respect he showed our senior engineers. Something about that specific quality stuck with me, understanding immediately that Marcus operated considerably differently from most executives I'd read about throughout my finance studies. If you've ever carried something quietly valuable that other people dismissed without ever bothering understanding its actual worth, drop a comment sharing your experience, and make sure you've hit subscribe, because everything I built quietly over the following years completely changes this entire story. I spent my early 20s working steadily at Vantage Robotics during regular business hours, while building something entirely separate during my evenings and weekends, a small personal investment portfolio focused specifically toward identifying promising early-stage companies most traditional investors overlooked completely. My grandfather's old lessons about patient, disciplined compounding stuck with me throughout this entire period. I lived considerably below my actual salary, driving an older used car and renting a modest apartment near the Vantage offices, redirecting nearly 40% of every paycheck toward investments I researched carefully during quiet evenings after work. I met Diego Alvarez during my second year at Vantage, a talented mechanical engineer working directly under Marcus on our core robotics platform. Diego grew up similarly modest himself, understanding immediately why I drove an older car and wore my grandfather's simple watch despite earning a genuinely respectable salary at Vantage. We started dating quietly during my third year there, both of us sharing exactly the same values regarding patient financial discipline rather than flashy, image-driven spending. I made my very first angel investment during this same period, putting $15,000 of my carefully saved money into a tiny agricultural technology startup, founded by two former University of Minnesota classmates, struggling desperately finding any serious investor willing, taking a genuine chance on their unproven idea. That investment felt terrifying at the time, representing nearly my entire savings account, though I'd researched their technology carefully enough feeling genuinely confident regarding its underlying potential. That agricultural startup grew steadily over the following 3 years, eventually getting acquired by a much larger company, turning my original $15,000 investment into just over $400,000 once that acquisition finally closed. I didn't tell anyone at Vantage about this success, continuing quietly working my regular data analyst position while using those returns funding several additional small investments throughout companies I researched carefully during my limited free time. Diego and I grew increasingly serious throughout this period, discussing marriage eventually, though our relationship hit a genuinely difficult stretch once Diego received a tempting job offer from a competing robotics company based out of Austin, Texas, offering considerably higher salary alongside genuine career advancement opportunities that Vantage, still relatively small at the time, simply couldn't match. Diego accepted that offer despite my hesitation about the distance, insisting our relationship could genuinely survive living in different states, given how committed we both felt toward each other. 6 months into that difficult long-distance arrangement, Diego called me late one night explaining honestly that he'd started developing genuine feelings for a colleague at his new company, someone he described as understanding his ambitious new career trajectory considerably better than I supposedly could from Minnesota. That heartbreak devastated me completely, arriving during exactly the same period I was quietly building genuine investment success that Diego himself never fully understood or appreciated throughout our entire relationship together. I threw myself entirely into both my Vantage work and my growing investment portfolio following that breakup, understanding clearly that building something genuinely mine mattered considerably more than any relationship built on convenience rather than authentic shared values. I formalized my investment activities during my mid-20s, establishing a small private fund I named Northland Capital, structured carefully through an LLC that kept my personal name completely separate from any public documentation regarding the fund's actual ownership. I made this deliberate choice partly for genuine privacy reasons, And partly, I'll admit honestly, because I genuinely enjoyed observing exactly how people treated me based purely on outward appearances, without any knowledge whatsoever regarding my actual growing financial success. I invested in 6 additional companies over the following 2 years through Northland Capital, developing a genuine reputation within Minnesota's small startup community as a patient, disciplined early-stage investor, though almost nobody outside that specific community ever connected the Northland Capital name directly toward Josie Lindqvist, the quiet data analyst still working her regular position at Vantage Robotics. Marcus Kessler himself, my own employer, approached Vantage's board during my 6th year at the company describing an ambitious expansion plan requiring substantial additional funding, hoping securing a significant seed investment that would finally let Vantage compete genuinely against much larger, better-funded robotics competitors throughout the entire industry. If you've ever quietly built something impressive while the people around you remained genuinely unaware of your actual capabilities, drop a comment sharing your own experience, because everything that happened once Marcus started searching for serious investors changes this entire story completely. Marcus spent nearly 8 months searching for the right investment partner for Vantage's ambitious expansion plan, meeting with several larger venture capital firms throughout Minneapolis and traveling occasionally toward Chicago and Silicon Valley, pursuing potential funding relationships. I followed these developments carefully from my position within Vantage's own data analytics team, understanding through internal company updates exactly how much Marcus genuinely needed this funding round succeeding, given how much personal financial risk he'd already taken building Vantage over the previous decade of his life. I made a specific decision during this period that I'd thought about carefully for several weeks beforehand. Northland Capital had grown substantially by this point, my original careful investments compounding steadily alongside additional capital I'd raised from several other patient, like-minded investors who valued exactly the same disciplined approach I'd learned originally from my grandfather years earlier. I reached out toward Marcus directly through Northland Capital's formal investment channels, deliberately avoiding any direct connection toward my actual identity as his own employee, working instead through Northland's professional investment team, which by this point included 2 additional analysts I'd hired specifically handling due diligence and deal structuring for the fund's growing portfolio. Marcus reviewed Northland Capital's investment proposal carefully alongside his existing board members, genuinely impressed by the fund's specific understanding regarding robotics industry fundamentals and Vantage's particular competitive advantages within warehouse automation technology. He scheduled an initial meeting through Northland's team, genuinely unaware throughout this entire process that Northland Capital's actual founder sat 2 floors below his own executive office every single day. I want to explain honestly exactly why I structured things this particular way, because I understand it might seem unnecessarily complicated given simpler alternatives existed. I genuinely wanted Marcus evaluating Northland's investment proposal purely based on its actual financial and strategic merits, without any complicated emotional dynamics regarding our existing employer-employee relationship, potentially influencing his genuine business judgment throughout serious funding negotiations. Additionally, I'll admit honestly, some part of me still carried complicated feelings from watching certain colleagues throughout Vantage treat me with subtle condescension over recent years, assuming my quiet demeanor and modest lifestyle choices reflected genuine limitations regarding my actual professional capabilities rather than deliberate personal values I'd chosen carefully. One colleague specifically, a sales executive named Chad Winthrop, who joined Vantage roughly 18 months earlier after a substantial signing bonus from his previous position, consistently treated me with exactly this kind of subtle, dismissive condescension throughout countless office interactions. Chad came from a genuinely wealthy family himself, and he seemed to genuinely enjoy displaying his own financial success through increasingly expensive purchases, constantly mentioning his growing collection of luxury items during casual office conversations. Northland Capital's due diligence process regarding Vantage continued carefully over the following 4 months, my team conducting extensive technical and financial analysis, while I personally reviewed every single detail myself during evenings after completing my regular Vantage work responsibilities. I genuinely believed in Marcus's vision and Vantage's underlying technology, having watched firsthand throughout my own years, working there exactly how carefully and thoughtfully Marcus built his entire company culture and technical foundation. Our investment committee at Northland Capital approved a preliminary term sheet roughly 5 months after Marcus's initial proposal, offering Vantage Robotics a $50 million seed investment that would fund their ambitious expansion plans while providing Northland substantial equity ownership, reflecting genuine confidence regarding the company's long-term potential. Marcus responded with genuine, obvious excitement once receiving this term sheet, scheduling a formal meeting with Northland's leadership team, finalizing remaining details before the investment officially closed. I made a specific decision regarding this particular meeting, one I'd carefully planned for several weeks, understanding that the timing had finally arrived for Marcus, genuinely understanding exactly who he'd been negotiating with throughout this entire funding process. If you're already sensing exactly how this reveal eventually unfolds, drop a comment sharing your prediction, because everything that happened during that specific executive elevator ride changes absolutely everything about this entire story. The formal closing meeting for Northland Capital's $50 million investment into Vantage Robotics was scheduled for a Thursday morning, held inside Vantage's executive conference room on the top floor of our downtown Minneapolis office building. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing my usual understated professional clothing rather than anything flashy, wearing my grandfather's simple analog watch exactly like I did every single day throughout my entire career at Vantage. I genuinely felt nervous walking toward the elevator that morning, understanding clearly that today represented the exact moment my carefully maintained privacy regarding Northland Capital would finally end completely. I stepped into the crowded elevator around 9 that morning, joined by several other Vantage employees heading toward various floors throughout our building, including Chad Winthrop, who stepped inside moments after me carrying his usual confident, slightly performative energy that had grown increasingly grating throughout recent months. Chad noticed me almost immediately, glancing down toward my wrist with an expression I'd witnessed from him plenty of times before. He said, holding his own wrist directly toward my face, "Josie, check this out. Just picked up this Rolex Submariner last weekend. Cost more than most people around here make in an entire month." I said calmly, "That's nice, Chad." He continued anyway, clearly not finished making his specific point in front of our other co-workers crowded inside that elevator. He said, gesturing toward my grandfather's watch, "Meanwhile, you're still wearing whatever cheap plastic thing you found at a gas station. Seriously, Josie, you make decent money here. Maybe invest in something that actually looks successful for once." Several co-workers shifted uncomfortably, clearly recognizing Chad's comment crossed some obvious line, though nobody said anything directly given the general awkwardness that comes from witnessing exactly this kind of workplace dynamic unfold inside a crowded, slow-moving elevator. I said nothing in response, genuinely unbothered given everything I understood about the actual value represented by that specific watch, alongside everything happening just minutes later, once we reached our top-floor destination. The elevator continued climbing steadily, Chad still smiling with obvious satisfaction, believing he'd genuinely won some meaningful exchange between us. The elevator doors opened on our building's top executive floor, and Marcus Kessler himself stepped inside directly, dressed formally for our scheduled closing meeting, clearly heading down briefly checking something before returning upstairs for our appointment. He spotted me immediately among that crowded elevator, his expression shifting instantly into something considerably more formal and respectful than his usual casual greeting toward Vantage employees. He said, giving me a small, genuine bow that clearly startled everyone else standing inside that elevator, "Ms. Lindqvist, I apologize for any confusion, but I wanted personally letting you know before our formal meeting upstairs. Northland Capital's $50 million seed investment officially cleared final approval from our board just 20 minutes ago. We're genuinely thrilled moving forward with your fund as our primary partner throughout this entire expansion." The elevator went completely silent. Chad's confident expression drained away almost instantly, his mouth opening slightly though no words emerged for several long seconds. Several other co-workers exchanged obviously shocked glances, clearly processing this information alongside everything Chad had just said moments earlier regarding my supposedly cheap, unsuccessful appearance. Marcus continued, seemingly unaware initially regarding the specific tension he just walked directly into, though his expression shifted once he noticed Chad's obvious discomfort standing directly beside me. He said, "Josie, I know you've maintained privacy regarding Northland Capital throughout this entire due diligence process, and I genuinely respect that decision completely. But given everything's finalized now, I wanted making sure you received proper recognition here at Vantage regarding everything you've built." I said calmly, "Thank you, Marcus, I appreciate that." Chad finally found his voice, though it emerged considerably smaller and less confident than his earlier boasting tone. He said, "Wait, you're Northland Capital, the fund that's investing $50 million into Vantage." I said, "That's correct, Chad." If you're imagining exactly how uncomfortable that elevator ride became for Chad after this reveal, drop a comment sharing your prediction, because everything that happened once those doors finally opened completely transformed my entire professional reputation at Vantage. The elevator doors finally opened on the top executive floor, and Marcus gestured warmly toward me stepping out first, several coworkers still standing there completely stunned, processing everything they'd just witnessed unfold during that brief, uncomfortable ride. Chad stood frozen momentarily before quickly composing himself, clearly attempting recovering some remaining dignity given everything he'd said just minutes earlier. He said, "Josie, I had no idea. That watch I just assumed." I said calmly, "It belonged to my grandfather, Chad. He worked as a bank loan officer for almost 40 years, and he taught me everything I genuinely understand about building real wealth quietly rather than flashy, expensive purchases that mostly exist impressing other people." Chad's face flushed with obvious embarrassment, understanding clearly exactly how poorly his earlier comments reflected upon him now, especially given the considerably larger audience that had witnessed his entire dismissive exchange with someone who apparently controlled $50 million in investment capital, flowing directly into our own company's future. Marcus walked me toward the executive conference room, where several Northland Capital board members had already gathered, formally welcoming me as their fund's founder in front of Vantage's entire leadership team for the very first time. Word spread quickly throughout the building over the following hours, colleagues who'd previously barely acknowledged my presence suddenly treating me with obviously different, considerably more respectful energy. I want to be honest that this attention felt genuinely strange initially, understanding clearly that people's treatment shifted purely based on learning about my financial success, rather than anything regarding my actual character or capabilities that had remained completely unchanged throughout my entire time at Vantage. This realization taught me something important about exactly how many people judge others based purely on visible surface indicators, rather than genuine underlying substance. Chad approached me privately later that same afternoon, his earlier confident demeanor completely replaced by something considerably more humble and uncertain. He said, "Josie, I owe you a genuine apology. What I said in that elevator about your watch, about assuming things regarding your success, that was genuinely wrong of me." I accepted his apology honestly, though I explained clearly that his comment revealed something considerably deeper regarding how he generally treated people based purely on outward appearances rather than genuine character or accomplishment. He seemed to genuinely take that feedback seriously, and our working relationship improved considerably over the following months, Chad approaching his interactions with considerably more genuine humility going forward. Marcus and I developed a genuinely strong working partnership throughout Northland Capital's ongoing investment in Vantage Robotics, my fund's $50 million fueling substantial expansion that transformed Vantage from a modest regional robotics company into a genuinely significant competitor throughout the entire national warehouse automation industry over the following 2 years. I eventually transitioned away from my original data analyst position, taking a formal board seat representing Northland Capital's substantial ownership stake, while continuing growing my broader investment funds portfolio throughout Minnesota's expanding startup ecosystem. Priya, my childhood friend from Duluth, eventually joined Northland Capital formally as well, bringing genuine operational expertise that helped scale our funds' growing due diligence and portfolio management capabilities considerably. I met someone new roughly a year after Northland's investment in Vantage officially closed, a fellow investor named Owen Marsh, who genuinely understood and respected exactly the same patient, disciplined approach toward both business and personal life that I'd learned originally from my grandfather decades earlier. Our relationship developed slowly and genuinely, built on shared values rather than any flashy romantic gesture, exactly the kind of partnership I'd always genuinely hoped eventually finding for myself. I think about that elevator ride often, remembering Chad's confident smile while mocking my grandfather's simple watch, genuinely unaware regarding exactly what stood quietly beside him that entire morning. I understand now that moment taught me something genuinely important about patience, humility, and trusting that real value rarely needs announcing itself loudly to earn genuine respect eventually. Northland Capital continues growing steadily today, funding dozens of promising early-stage companies throughout Minnesota and beyond, each investment built on exactly the same careful, patient philosophy my grandfather originally taught me sitting at our kitchen table, using dried beans demonstrating compound interest all those years earlier. I still wear that same watch every single day, understanding now more than ever exactly why my grandfather told me real value rarely announces itself loudly, that the flashiest things inside any room usually mean the least regarding genuine, lasting substance underneath the surface. If there's one thing I hope you take from everything I've shared today, it's this. Never let anyone convince you that visible, flashy success represents the only genuine measure of accomplishment. Sometimes the quietest, most unassuming people around you are building something considerably more substantial than anyone watching could genuinely imagine possible. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire story today. I would genuinely love hearing your own thoughts down in the comments section below. Have you ever had someone underestimate you based purely on outward appearances, only to discover the genuine truth later? What do you think the real lesson here actually is? Please share your own experience, because these comments genuinely mean so much to me. And if this story resonated with you even slightly, please hit that subscribe button, because there are so many more stories exactly like this one coming your way very soon.